This video has been brought to you by a generous grant from AARP. Probably the best way to go about this series of videos that we're doing with regards to making a home ADA compliant. First of all, that document is not really built for residences. There's a lot of good information in there about what you can do to any environment to make it more hospitable and functional for people with different things going on. So probably the best way to handle this for us is to break down specific common issues that people are facing as they're aging that affect their ability to just function in their daily life. And so this first video is going to be focused on mobility. So before we start, I want to have a really quick conversation about who's dealing with these issues and just what it's like for the average person in this country. So according to a study done by the AARP in 2020, 1 in 4 adults in the United States lives with a disability. An estimated 53 million adults in the US have acted as unpaid caregivers for a child or adult in the last year. 17% of adults in the US act as unpaid caregivers to adults over 50. That's a lot of people. If you're a person who's going through this, you're not alone. Walk 4 houses down, somebody else is dealing with the same thing. And it's really useful for us to be able to work together, share information, share what we've learned. We'd love to see some comments about what you like, don't like from our videos. Constructive criticism is always helpful. We appreciate any sort of interaction that you can give. It only helps us to make better videos. Given that we kind of understand a lot of us are dealing with the same thing, let's start out with step 1. Mobility is just don't fall. A National Institute of Health, they did a study on elderly people over 60 years old. They were trying to link their mortality to a fall incident, and they found that 25% of adults over 60 that had a severe fall, meaning like they broke a bone, broke a femur, broke a hip, broke a leg, did something like that, okay, 25% of them died within a year. And 4% of those that have a minor fall die within a year. So there's a significant decrease in just limiting the severity of the fall. Obviously, we want to avoid the fall. If we're going to fall, we want it to be as controlled and gentle as possible. And that means just set up the environment in a way that's not going to be conducive to a really bad incident. So we're going to walk through a few tips here, simple things that you can do, and we're going to break it down into a couple different topics. And the first topic is tripping. Tripping is the number 1 quickest way to send an elderly person to the ground. Tripping comes from thresholds, stairs, clutter, cables and stuff on the ground, small furniture, spacing of the furniture, loose rugs and mats, and just the coloring of rugs and carpeting can be a trip hazard in and of itself. So let's go right back up to the top of our list, and we're going to start with thresholds. For those of you who don't know what a threshold is, here's a couple pictures of thresholds. Sometimes a threshold can be really small. There's a little bit of a change in elevation if you're walking into the kitchen or a bathroom. This will happen fairly frequently if flooring covers have been changed. Sometimes there's just like a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch gap, a raise or lowered section as you're walking from one room to another. They're typically covered up by just a little piece of flooring that's kind of angled for that. Sometimes it can be a little bit bigger. Sometimes it can be like a little bit of a step up as you're walking into the front door of a house. Or if you're walking down into the garage, there's usually 4 to 6 inch step going down into the garage. And sometimes you've got stairs, everybody's house is a little bit different, but you gotta be mindful of that threshold. We have those thresholds in our house to try and avoid water coming inside, but if you're just misjudging that step, even just a little bit, it can create quite a trip. So right now, we're gonna show how to make a very low ramp for just managing that threshold. All right, so we've got a front door threshold here. It's about 4 inches high. That is just a sheet of plywood. It's called a project panel. You pick them up at Home Depot. They're 2 feet by 4 feet. And all I wanted to do was just get the angle that thing was gonna have to be laid down at. And we're gonna cut that angle off the top of this piece of exterior grade 2x4. That way we have something flush to lay the top part of that board on right underneath our door threshold. So as you can see right there, I'm gonna give this about 3/4 of an inch below that threshold. That way our 3/4 inch plywood is going to fit flush up against that threshold at the top. We're gonna use 3.5 inch decking screws to make sure we get a nice solid contact into the frame job underneath the door. And now we're going to take the pencil and we're just gonna set those on those side supports on the side. And I know I measured off of the top of the plywood, but the angle is the same on the top as on the bottom. And we're going to attach these side supports just to give this thing a little bit of support. Now the dog, have you ever noticed how YouTubers always like give their pets or their kids like some funny name and act like, this is my boss? That's ridiculous. I'm not doing that. That dog does nothing but mess up my projects. I try desperately to keep that dog under wraps before he destroys everything that I work on. So I'm gonna call him Loki. So we're gonna dry fit this here, but it's wonky. Why is it wonky? I'm showing you this mistake that I made on purpose, by the way. It's wonky because I forgot that I measured the top of the plywood, not the bottom. And I needed to slide those supports slightly down, or excuse me, slightly up towards the top, and I've got to cut off the back of them so that it would actually fit the bottom of those. But instead I started sawing things off. It took me a little while. I finally figured it out, and what do you know? I've got a functional ramp. Now, that thing, if it gets wet, is just going to be a slip hazard. It's not totally covered, but this area doesn't get a ton of rain just because of the way the eaves and everything sit on the house. So I'm just going to use some traction tape. If this is going to be for an area that's going to get a lot of water, you probably want to use like some roofing shingles instead. With regards to stairs, stairs are a huge trip hazard. Houses have different kinds of stairs. I used to be a real estate appraiser. I've come from 3 generations of real estate appraisers. I've walked in and out of houses my entire life since I was 9 years old. I have seen so many different kinds of stairs. Some of them are absolute death traps. Hopefully the stairs in your house have been built to an appropriate code, but there is no guarantee that anybody's house doesn't have some kind of funky set of stairs where it's too high of a rise over too short of a run. If that is the situation, you might want to talk to the contractor, see if there's a way to kind of adapt that stairwell for the person in your home if they really have to be using that stairwell. Just that is a really, really difficult situation to be in. But the last thing you want to do is have somebody taking a tumble down a really steep, unsafe staircase. So that is no small feat to address the way a stairwell sits in your home. But if it's the mortality of the person that lives there, that is the price that's paid, it's cheaper to just get the stairwell addressed. Now let's assume from this point forward that is not the case. We have perfectly conforming stairwells. The main thing we want to do is make sure that every step is easy to identify. Sometimes steps like these can be hard for someone as they age, maybe their vision's going a little bit, to be able to distinguish one step from the next. Now there's a really, really simple trick to help distinguish one step from another, and it's traction tape. So there's a million different kinds of traction tape. I really like this 3M stuff. I've been playing around with this stuff for the last couple of days. I just picked it up at Home Depot. It was only a couple of bucks, pretty cheap. Sticks really, really well. It reminded me of double-sided carpet tape. So it gets a nice, clean surface, but it's also some grit to it, like what you'd get with like a really coarse grit sandpaper. You can buy it in lots of different colors, so you can take the stairs, whatever color your stairs are, find a color that's contrasting to that and put it right on the lip. It gives a little bit more traction and makes it really obvious where the edge of that stairwell is. Now the other thing that you can do is you can add some lighting to your stairwell. Everybody has to get up every once in a while, use the bathroom, whatever they're gonna do in the nighttime, and making sure that that stairwell is well lighted is absolutely a wonderful step to take to make sure that everybody's gonna be very clear as to where they need to put their next step. There's a million different ways to light a stairwell. We're gonna walk through a couple of these. You have rope lighting that you can put in right on each step, and you can hardwire that. It's a little bit more expensive. You may need to get an electrician depending on how savvy you are with wiring and electrical stuff. But if you want to go cheaper, you can do just these little stick-on lights that are battery powered and they're motion activated. You do want to kind of go slow. It takes a second for the light to turn on. So the person that has the mobility issues is going to need to just make sure they take their time as they walk up the steps. But this is super simple, requires no messing around with electrical wires or anything like that. Just stick them on the wall and get moving. You can also go super fancy and put in little canned lights or things like that built into the walls on each step or every other step or whatever. But once again, that's going to require some electrical work and a little bit higher level of understanding on how to fix stuff. So the next step is clutter. I've been a real estate appraiser for many, many years. I know for a fact that everybody has a very different idea as to what clean is. I can't even imagine getting into the conversation of what somebody's idea of clean is. I have seen people apologize to me for the cleanliness of their home when they are literally in the most immaculate home I've ever seen. And I have had people act like, what is my problem, as I'm stepping through a house that is filled with trash bags. Everybody is different. What I will tell you and the advice that I will give you is, if you are concerned about the safety and the mobility of somebody that you love, you had better get a little bit more comfortable with retentiveness. It is your friend. Getting rid of something that is a potential trip hazard doesn't hurt anything and can only keep somebody upright. All right, now with regards to cables, everything has cables now. Everything that we own is turning into an item that has to be plugged in. Modern homes, almost standard, have outlets in the floor of the living room and outlets on the wall over by where they expect the TV to go. Everything is expected to be plugged in spots. But if your home wasn't built in the last 10 years, chances are you don't have something like that. And heaven forbid your home is 40 or 50 years old, you really don't have anything like that. You probably have way fewer outlets, and you're gonna string cords across from all sorts of places to be able to get those things plugged in, and we want to be able to address that in a lot better way, because every cord that's crossing a walkway or the floor in some way, even if you cover it up with a little threshold like this, that's still a hazard. Okay, that's still something that can trip somebody up, and you just don't want to give them the chance to have that moment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you how to take some floor. The flooring that we're working with here is vinyl plank, and we're going to put an outlet in the floor, run it from a nearby outlet, and make sure that this couch can be plugged into to the floor without having to run anything across a walkway. The plug will be right underneath the couch at all times.
All right, so keep in mind when you're choosing where to put this new outlet, what is going to be going over the top of it. Sometimes there's braces or things like that on a couch that could run into the cords that are coming up vertically out of the floor now. You just want to be mindful of that. But once you've got your spot picked out, drill a hole, use your jigsaw to cut the square for the junction box. And also, here's a little tip: try to avoid any of your floor joists, which I did not do in this case. It just makes the job a little bit easier and keeps you from having to do any sort of joist repair. But once you've got that taken care of, we're going to stick some the appropriate size Romex wire down inside that hole and go down into the crawl space. Now, the lighting conditions down in the crawl space were awesome, so we're not going to use that video. I'm going to show you exactly what I did down in the crawl space to show you how to wire these things up. The blue and the red marked wires there are basically there. I found a place going from one outlet to another in the living room, and I cut that wire in half, and then we're going to splice off another line to go up to our floor outlet, our new floor outlet. So these are 3-wire connectors, little push-in connectors that you can get at Home Depot or whatever store is closest to you. And this is really simple how to do this. There's 3 wires inside each one of those lengths of Romex. There's a white wire, a black wire, and a ground. Now, each one of these connectors should have all of the same color wire in them. So black goes to the black connector, white goes to the white connector, ground goes to the ground. Now, when we get to the place where we're going to put these into the actual outlet, if you look in the back, most of these outlets have a really simple marking on them: white, black, and then the ground is the little screw over on the side. Pretty hard to mess that up. Okay, but just in case the wording is a little bit different, your neutral is the white line, the black is your live line, and the copper one is your ground. Now, the actual junction box that we bought, it actually came in a kit, like a floor box kit. It has this little screw right there that allows you to raise it up and lower it after you install it. That whole junction box will come up or go down to make sure it's nice and flush with the floor. Now, once you have the junction box flush with the floor, you screw in the actual outlet component right there, and then you just put in the screws on the faceplate until it's all flush. And you notice you can still adjust that junction box height after you put the faceplate in.
So this next one is a little bit of a touchy subject, I think, for some people. People have different ideas as to what they want in their home. How people decorate their home can be a very touchy subject. I'm not trying to address the issue of design and appeal and decorating a home. I'm focused on what do you have to do to keep somebody safe that you care about. Sometimes very, very beautiful decorated rooms like this one can have unexpected hazards like this and this and this. These things are possible trip hazards. They do play a function in the room, but they are minor functions, and they are mostly aesthetic in purpose. If we're going to make a choice between how a room looks and the safety of the person who lives in that room, me personally, I'm always going to veer towards the safety of the person who lives there. You know, look into some decorating styles if this is really important to you, like minimalism and some of these other things, that you can have a beautiful room that's just doesn't have quite so much going on, and so many things in there that are a potential hazard. And you also need to look at where these things are being placed. You want to have clearly obvious walkways. You don't want to have somebody looking going, well, I got to get over there to get that thing, but I'm not totally sure how to get there. If that's a consideration going through someone's mind, you got too much stuff in too small of a place. You probably need to remove something. We don't want people making that consideration and then going for it and ended up on the floor. Rugs and mats are absolutely essential in a house. We typically place them at specific points in a home that keep water or other spills from getting spread out all over the place. Okay, you have a mat at your front door because when you walk in on a rainy day, you don't want to track all the water that's on your shoes or your clothes or whatever inside and have a potential slip hazard. So we're not saying get rid of rugs and mats, but we want to be very judicious about the rugs and mats that we choose. So we've done a little bit of a mock-up here to show you a couple different kinds of rugs and what are the benefits and the pitfalls of these rugs.
So this first one is a death trap. It has nothing to keep it from sliding around. It wants to fly all over the place. The profile is pretty thick, so it's going to be easy to catch your foot on. I think they call that a rag rug. Now this is super slippery, but it's a much thinner profile, so you're much less likely to catch yourself on that as long as you can keep it in place. So I'm going to take some double-sided carpet tape. I've never done this before. I have no idea how well this is going to work, but I'm just going to throw this down on here. I figured 3 little strips, and we'll see if we can keep this thing in place while I try to kick it around. Now, as I kick this thing around, it is kind of bunching up on the edges, so I take a little bit more of that double-sided carpet tape, and I'm going to just stick it on either side, or I kind of neglected to put any on here. And you know what? It actually stays in place pretty well here. So I got 5 pieces of tape on this thing. I kick it around. It doesn't really want to pull up. So for something like a bath mat, that's not bad. It's pretty thin. It's not a bad choice. Now this thing says it has a no slide backing on it, but it slides around and it's pretty darn thick, so we want to avoid that. This is a little bit better. It's thin, but as you can see, the backing on it still allows it to move around a little bit. Now these ones, I love these. They're super rigid. They don't slide around, but even if they do, they don't bunch up.
Now the last thing is, there's different flooring types. If you have a hard surface flooring, you're kind of missing some potential hazards with that, but you're gaining others. If you have carpeting, you are gaining a certain number of hazards and you're losing others. Okay, if you have carpet and you get water on the carpet, that is not going to make anybody fall. If you have vinyl blank and you get water on it, somebody could definitely take a spill. If you have vinyl plank and you have somebody who struggles to just pick their toes up all the way when they're taking a step, that is not going to be as big of an issue. If you have a big thick shag carpet with a nice fat pad to make it nice and comfy to walk on, and that person tries to walk on it with that toe that's not coming up, you're going to have a tumble. It's not about best or worst, it's about understanding the hazards that come with your particular kind of flooring. But some houses have multiple kinds of flooring. When you have a transition from, say, hardwood to a carpet, you want to make sure that that transition is as obvious as possible, and the best way to do that is to make a really stark contrast between the color of the hardwood and the color of the carpet. So I think we've given a pretty good overview of ways to avoid tripping and the most common tripping hazards. Even though this may seem a little bit redundant, I want to talk a little bit about slipping. Just the nature of slipping is a little bit different than tripping, and it's going to be more of a concern depending on what kind of amenities your house has, or whatever environment you're in. Slipping is not going to be a huge issue on carpeting. If your home has wall-to-wall carpet in every single room, bathrooms, kitchen, everything, which yes, I have seen that, then you don't really have a lot of concern for slipping when you're in your house. If you have harder surfaces that are meant to repel water rather than soak them up, tile, vinyl plank, hardwood, stone, some of these things that the water can potentially sit on there, or whatever the heck else could be a slip hazard. You know, if people are dusting and using products like Pledge or things like that, those can be very, very slippery. There can be some kind of overspray. If you spray them onto a piece of furniture or something, you want to be cognizant of that, because you get a little bit of Pledge on a vinyl plank floor or a tile floor, and you have an ice skating rink. You want to be aware, if you're gonna use something like that, spray it over the top of the furniture, onto a rag or whatever, so there's no chance for overspray, and make sure that you're being careful about that. No open, spraying like that, and hoping for the best. But those harder flooring styles, that they're typically put in places where you're going to be managing some sort of higher traffic, or traffic from the outside to the inside, where crud gets drug in on your feet or whatever. You've got to manage that. So if you've got an entryway, get a thin rug, get a sturdy rug, a rug that's going to be staying in the same place. If your rug is moving around too much, get some of that carpet tape on it and put that at the entryway. Put it in front of the kitchen sink if there's a lot of splattering around the kitchen sink. Put it around the bathtub or the shower, and make sure that there's something to manage that water. Be aware of plumbing. You've got a lot of places where that water flows through your house. So it's not just outside your shower. There's the connections with your dishwasher, the connections with your clothes washer, the connections underneath your toilets where the water comes into the tank. If any of those connections go bad, or if they're starting to wear, there's a little bit of a drip or something like that, that little bit of a drip is eventually going to turn into a puddle that's going to surprise you one day. So if you're wanting to slip proof a house, go around, it takes 10 or 15 minutes. It's not the worst thing in the world. Get a pair of pliers and make sure that you've got solid connections. You might have to change out a few seals inside of the water tube, the water hoses or whatever, but make sure those connections are solid. Any kind of repair is going to be very, very minimal in cost. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it is well freaking worth it to make sure that somebody is not going to take a slipping fall. A slipping fall can be really, really wicked, because man, your feet just go out from underneath you really quick. That can lead to head injuries, and it's not like a controlled fall where you're putting your hand down. Now, as far as outside of your home, if you live in a place where it gets cold, you've got to be really, really careful. I actually had a situation with my mom last year where I was over at her house. We were walking out the door, and I actually looked out at the pathway going out of her front door, and I said to her, I said, man, this might be a little slick today. And literally, like, as that was happening, my mom's going down. I grab her, we keep her from having a nasty fall. It scared the life out of her, but she realized really, really quickly, don't trust that pathway. She's new to Idaho cold, and it surprised her. Really easy way to deal with this is have a bucket or container or something of some ice melt right by your front door. The other thing we want to be aware of is in your shower, in your tub, make sure you have a very, very solid textured surface to stand on. Don't take any risks in the shower. Go to Walmart or Home Depot or some place for $10 or less. You can get traction stickers, put them down. It doesn't matter what it costs. It's easy. It's the absolute simplest way to keep somebody from getting injured in probably the most dangerous place in your home as you age. That's about all we've got for our slipping. Now, with regards to furniture, interior decorating is an art form. You have to have skill and creativity and the same things that you would need to have to be able to do any sort of art. The people that do it well are extremely skilled, but there are many different kinds of art. And if you really, really are someone who appreciates that, branch out a little bit and find a style that will be functional as well as beautiful for what your loved one or you need in your life. There's lots of ways to put together a home. You don't have to make it a hazard in order to make it beautiful. Now, you want to be aware of the height that chairs, couches, mattresses, are at in the home. You don't want them super low. That's going to create difficulty and a potential fall if you're trying to go down too far to be able to get into something, or if you're struggling to be able to get out of it. You can fall trying to get out of a couch, and it's not pretty. So you can fall trying to get up out of a bed that is too low. Now, you can also have stuff that is up too high. A lot of the mattresses that are being made nowadays are really, really thick, and they're sitting in bed frames that are not necessarily newer bed frames. They're 20 or 30 or 40 years old maybe. So they are intended for mattresses that were built before our modern super thick mattresses. And you have the capacity to have this mattress that is like super high, and if people are having to get into a bed that is too high, you have a fall risk. Be aware, you want to have kind of a gentle sit down, just a couple of inches to be able to get someone into bed. Chairs and couches should also be not super deep set in and hard to get out of for someone who's having issues with mobility. And the other thing that we want to be aware of is there's also like European style furniture that has very low backs. It's kind of a very low profile up off of the floor, and when people are walking around, especially as their vision goes, their peripheral vision may not be the strongest, and you want to have something in front of them that is up higher. They're less likely to run into something that has a higher back on it than something that's low, because they may not even pick up that low profile couch that's in the bottom part of their peripheral vision as they're walking into a room looking at faces. So be aware of that. Think about that in the furniture that's being put in these homes, because people do tend to kind of focus up at head level, and if there's obstacles that are not easily observed that are too low, you can run into a real headache, trip somebody up pretty bad. Footrests, coffee tables, a lot of these things, just use them as little and judiciously as possible. The footrests, try to get something, maybe a recliner that has a footrest that will go up and come back and disappear. Those little footrests that are independent of a chair or couch can be really hazardous just because people miss them. With the furniture, throw pillows, cushions, things like that. Avoid cushions and pillows that are excessively soft. If somebody starts to trip or stumble or go down, they will instinctively reach out. And if there is no pushback on the thing that they're reaching out to, it's going to take them out worse. A couch with a cushion on it or something like that, you'd like for that to be a fairly firm cushion so that people don't go into it 6 inches before they get any pushback as they're starting to make a fall. The same thing goes for mattresses. As you get older, the more sturdy that the things are around you, the better it's going to be for your stability. So casters are wheels that sit underneath pieces of furniture or various objects. Sometimes it's a table, sometimes it's a chair. Just don't put things on wheels in a home with someone who's having issues with mobility. If you have a concern about someone's ability to stay upright, get the freaking casters out of the house. Sometimes you can pull them off and you can put a different kind of base on it if it's a table or a chair. Rolling stuff is not stable. They're gonna trust it, they're gonna trip or something, grab onto it, and then you're gonna have an interaction with that object that is also simultaneously going to give way and come down tumbling with them, and you're gonna have somebody who falls on a chair and cracks their ribs. Or like these little wood block cutting tables that have casters that are in the kitchen and stuff like that. You see somebody starts to stumble a little bit in the kitchen, they grab onto that just instinctively as a thing to try and support them, and next thing you know, they're falling and their forearm goes onto a big metal table leg or something, and their forearm breaks. And that's kind of ironic because our last topic that we're going to hit here is managing how to carry items and store items and keep stuff clear and also be able to move things around as someone's strength is maybe waning a bit and their stability is waning. You know, they still need to be able to function within their home. They may want to be able to get the, you know, the tote that has the Christmas decorations out or something like that. And you've got to find a way to allow them to do that without creating hazard in the meantime. The casters are not your friend. What I've found is useful is to try and use storage totes to store as much stuff as possible and then utilize a hand truck. Some people call it a dolly, I call it a hand truck. You know, if you're horrified by what I call it, you know, leave some comments in there. I'd love to see what everybody has to say about that. If you store things into a tote and you use this hand truck to scoop underneath it, you can pull it around wherever you want to go. It avoids what I like to call the shed massacre accidents. You know, people are trying to maintain their independence. Nobody wants to have to go and ask somebody else to come help them every time they need something moved in their home. If you keep things organized in these little totes, they're not terribly expensive. You can get them all over the place for just a few bucks, especially if you buy them at the right time. And then just one of these little hand trucks, and you can get them super cheap. All they got to do is, you know, push the ledge of it underneath the tote and then carry it where they pull it around where they want it to go. So first of all, we want to finish up this video giving a big thank you to the AARP. Not only has the AARP been doing research and funding studies and trying to make life just in general better for people as they age for decades, but they're continually trying to improve just communities in general, and they've been extraordinarily generous with us as we're trying to figure out how to do, you know, new videos and do this channel in a way that's useful to someone that could be watching it. I can't speak highly enough about the effort and the way that they go about their business. Thank you very much to AARP for sponsoring not only this video, but several videos that we're going to be doing here in the future. To sum up the point of this video, things are changing. Change isn't a bad thing, it's a different thing. The biggest part of what people are dealing with as you're going through something like this is the change. And dealing with change is a mental exercise. The physical things that you actually have to do to adapt an environment or something like that, it's actually pretty minimal if you look at it with a kind of a larger perspective. The difficult part is maintaining that mentality of accepting the change that is coming and being willing to just kind of openly adapt to those changes that you may not have control over. And I think that's really one of the things that tends to get people the most, is adapting to that change and the fact that you're not the one who's initiating or controlling that change. But take it from me, as somebody who has been a caregiver for over 15 years now, change is just different. There's positive and there's negative to every aspect of your life. Everything tends to be a double-edged sword, but you can do this. It's a season, and it's a season that can be embraced regardless of what you're going to be dealing with. So focus on what matters to you. Focus on the people that you care about. Focus on the people that you love. We have another video that's going to be coming up here on the caregiver journey, what a caregiver has to do themselves to be able to manage these situations as they come falling in your lap. There's 340 million people in the United States. 1 in 4 of them, that is 85 million people in the United States, are dealing with some form of disability themselves. 53 million people, that's 1 in 7, are acting as an unpaid caregiver for an adult or child that they love. 17%, that's 57,800,000, have acted as an unpaid caregiver at some point in time in the last year. You are not alone. There are a lot of people out there who understand what you're going through, Be open about talking to somebody else to help them understand what you've learned, what has worked for you. And please feel free to use these videos in the comment section as a place to share, to ask questions. We will definitely do whatever we can to find answers if we don't know them, or answer the questions to the best of our ability. And feel free to tell us what you like, what you don't like. We'd love to have some subscribers. The subscribers and the likes always help us to get closer to the goal of being able to kind of do this on a full-time basis. The most important thing is that mental exercise. It's not bad, it's different, and you can adapt and focus on the ones that you love.